Making traversal interesting is something that open world video games have often struggled with, and the problem has only gotten worse as the worlds themselves have gotten larger and more complex, but the way that you travel through them has largely stayed the same. Death Stranding bucks this trend by being a game built around traversal. Rather than travelling just being something you're forced to do between gameplay, here travelling actually makes up the bulk of the gameplay. The game features a massive open world to explore, but it's one that requires effort to do so. It's a game that requires you to analyse and engage with your surroundings before you can traverse them. When I finished my first playthrough, I tried to reflect back on why I found this type of gameplay to be so much fun, and I eventually came to the conclusion that it's because of the sheer amount of decisions the game asks you to make in every single delivery. So I decided to make a video looking at each of these decisions in turn. When you think about decisions in video games, you might think of role-playing games that provide differing narratives based on the decisions that you make. What you might not consider is how some of the best games challenge you to make micro-decisions in the minute-to-minute gameplay. Death Stranding is full of these types of decisions, which can be broken down into two different categories: preparation and expedition. In the preparation phase, it's quite easy to see the decisions you're making, as most of this phase takes place in menus. First, you need to pick your delivery from the outpost. You can take on multiple deliveries at a time to try and be as efficient as possible, or focus on one delivery and try and get the best possible score. Next, you need to plan your route. You need to assess the destination, the terrain type, any potential obstacles like mountains and rivers, as well as threats such as BTs and mules. You need to decide on the best possible route that you can take. Now, based on that assessment, you need to decide what equipment you'll need for the journey ahead. However, unlike in most games, you can't take everything with you. Everything that you take will be weighing you down, making it impossible to take it all. So what you do take needs to be based on your previous assessment. Are you going over a mountain? You'll likely need ladders and climbing ropes. Going past a mule camp or BTs? You're going to need some kind of weapon. As well as all this equipment, don't forget you've still got to transport the actual cargo. This creates an interesting balancing act, where you don't want to be over encumbered, but at the same time you don't want to be left under equipped for the trek that you're making, finding yourself stuck on the wrong side of a river that you have no way of passing. Next, you need to decide on how to carry the cargo. Cargo can be placed on your back, attached to a limb, placed on a floating carrier or loaded onto a vehicle. Some places are safer than others. Cargo on the top of the stack can be knocked off by mules or failing to duck under a low passway. Cargo on your body is always at risk of being damaged in a fall. When carrying huge amounts of cargo, you need to try and keep the weight distributions fairly even. This will help to increase your stability and reduce the chance of a fall. Finally, if you're at an outpost with a garage, you might want to consider taking a vehicle. Vehicles have an important role to play, but should be used with restraint and not as a crutch. You need to make a judgment call on when they should be used. I think a lot of the issues people had with this game stem from trying to use vehicles where they're not supposed to go. In my opinion, it's not reasonable to expect a bike to be able to scale a mountain, and the game will make it difficult for you to do this. That's not to say you can't traverse tricky terrain with a bit of finesse, but you need to be aware of your vehicle's limit and decide when to use them and when to go on foot. In the expedition phase, you'll be deciding how and when to use your equipment. This phase is when the decisions you made earlier when you were packing your equipment come into play. This means something as trivial as crossing a river is given a lot more weight than it would otherwise have. Equipment is scarce because you're limited by what you can carry, so you want to make sure you're using your equipment as efficiently as possible. Making use of other players' equipment and structures when possible, and putting yours down when you see a good opportunity to benefit you and everyone else playing. When it comes to how to use your equipment, worth remembering that most pieces of equipment can be used in different ways. For example, a ladder can be used to ascend or descend a steep slope, but can also be used as a makeshift bridge to cross small ravines and rivers. This is perhaps the most obvious example, but all of the equipment in the game can have multiple uses when you take some time to experiment with them. The preparation phase wouldn't matter if the environment was easy to get around. Your decisions have weight because of the repercussions if you mess up. If your cargo falls into a river, you'll need to run downstream and attempt to retrieve it. If you drop it down a mountain, then it will be destroyed and you'll likely fail the delivery. So perhaps it might be a better idea just to walk around it, but it will end up taking more time. These are the types of decisions you'll constantly be weighing up in your head as you play. This may not sound like fun game design, but it's the punishing nature of the environment that makes it so satisfying when you eventually manage to conquer it. So I hope this video has helped to highlight some of the decisions that go into making the gameplay loop of Death Stranding so engaging, at least for me personally. I would however like to highlight some improvements that I think could be made to make this type of gameplay even more engaging though. The game feels like an exhausting journey. Even going back to the game to record this footage for the video, I was starting to feel burnt out. It's a very involved type of gameplay and I can see how this wouldn't apply itself very well to other games. Most of the decisions take place in the preparation phase, which mostly takes place in menus. This can get a bit tiring, and I can't help but think that maybe some of these decisions could have been incorporated into gameplay in a less static way. So in conclusion, not every open world game needs to be like Death Stranding. Putting such a large focus on traversal definitely has downsides, and wouldn't suit every type of game, but I would like to see some of the ideas here incorporated and taken even further to make traversal in other games more enjoyable.